So I'm Melissa Carney. I'm director of the Aspen Economic Strategy Group and a professor of economics at the University of Maryland. And I'm here with Brian Deese, who is director of the National Economic Council of the Biden administration. It's good to be with you, Brian. We're going to talk about a couple issues related to the theme of this summit, which of course is to have global leaders converge around ideas and actions to promote more inclusive growth. So I'd like to start by asking you what that term inclusive growth means. It could mean a lot of different things to different people. And as director of the National Economic Council, how are you and your team thinking about this? What does inclusive growth mean to the Biden administration? And what are the key policies that will be necessary to get us to a more inclusive capitalist system in the U.S.?
Well, thanks, Melissa. And it's great to be part of this conversation. Inclusive growth is big, and it can mean a lot of things, but really, in a sense, it captures how we're thinking about our entire approach to economic policy. President Biden often talks about growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And in a sense, that's his very plain-spoken way of describing our aspiration for economic policy, which is to provide dignity and opportunity for working Americans across the country, particularly those who have had less voice or less economic opportunity in the past. And so on the how, it's really about a couple of things. First, we inherited an economic crisis. We're still living through a pandemic crisis, and we have to take immediate actions commensurate with that. I think you've seen in the speed and the strength of our economic and labor market recovery, different from prior crises, some of that in action. But also, we have failed as a country to make the kinds of public investments that we know drive more shared growth, whether that's in our physical and research infrastructure or in our human capital, our children and our families. And so the investment agenda, the long-term investment agenda that we are pursuing, is designed to build that more inclusive growth for the long term.
How is the administration's approach to climate policy related? How does it interact with or intersect with your more direct policy pushes on the inclusive growth front?
One of the things that we have tried to do from early on in this administration is recognize that the climate crisis and our economic crisis are intimately related, and you can't have a viable economic strategy without grappling with both the impacts of climate change and also the need to mitigate those impacts going forward. And so when you do that, I think one place to start is that sort of inclusive growth is you need to solve climate change in order to have an inclusive growth strategy, in part because the impacts of climate change are deeply regressive. Lower income Americans, and this is true both within country within the United States, but internationally as well, but lower income Americans disproportionately bear the burden of the impact of extreme weather events, of air pollution, both localized air pollution and nationally. And at the same time, viably solving climate change through new innovation and building new job opportunities in the United States also creates new opportunities, particularly for communities that have been disproportionately negatively impacted in the past. So we see it as both, leaving climate change unmitigated would actually drive less shared growth. You could have for a short period of time, you could drive fast growth, but the negative impacts of climate change would increasingly impact inequality. But by integrating climate into an economic strategy, we think that that's actually one of the best ways to have more sustainable growth over the long term.
Brian, the climate crisis is clearly a global crisis, and addressing it in a meaningful way is going to require global engagement and global cooperation. How is the Biden administration thinking about engaging with our international partners on this and restoring our national leadership on the global stage?
Well, this is an issue that can only be solved globally. And so the question is as important as anything. Our strategy has been pretty straightforward. The first is we have to reestablish the United States as a committed actor on ambitious climate action. We've lost that position over the last several years, and we've lost time and lost ground as a result. So by re-entering the Paris Agreement, bringing the countries of the world together, demonstrating our willingness to collaborate, but also demonstrating our own ability to move domestically, that is most importantly step one. And so our entire domestic agenda, the investments that we are pursuing now in our physical infrastructure, in our resilience, and in driving our power sector, our transportation sector toward the president's climate goals are critical to giving ourselves a credible platform to engage internationally. The second step is we have to step up to our commitments to provide the financing at scale to help countries around the world speed the transition to lower carbon solutions, not just in the production of energy, but in transportation and agriculture and other large systems that are going to need to transform towards zero carbon solutions. The president just a couple of weeks ago announced a commitment to double international climate finance to $11 billion annually. That puts us on a pathway to meet the commitment in the Paris Agreement to $100 billion in public and private capital. But the truth is we're going to need trillions of dollars. The good news is we're pushing the rock down the hill because the market is increasingly rewarding lower carbon, more sustainable solutions. But the United States being in the game with creative financing tools to help countries move is step two. And then step three is the diplomatic push that Secretary Kerry and the president are leading to try to once again bring the countries of the world together to increase their ambition, increase collectively their ambition. At the end of the day, I spent a lot of time working to try to put the Paris Agreement together in 2015. And at the end of the day, what has changed most significantly is that the economic opportunity and the economic dividend of actually leading in clean energy solutions, clean energy industries is enormous. I think countries now see that. So the United States playing a role as a constructive actor, but being very clear, we're doing this in our own self-interest because building the clean energy capabilities of the future here in the United States will be good for American workers. We can export those opportunities, those innovations as well.
So I have one last question for you on leadership. This is a summit of global leaders. The public's trust in elected leaders, in our institutions, in our nation's experts, it's at a low. One exception to this might be the private sector that really came through for us in many ways during the pandemic of the past year. As someone sitting in a really important position of leadership, what do you think it's going to take to restore public trust in our nation's leaders and our nation's leading institutions?
Well, first and foremost, a commitment to governing focused on science and facts and competence. I think that you mentioned the pandemic, and I think that if one thing that can come out of this awful pandemic and all of the human and economic pain and toil that it has caused is an understanding, certainly in the United States, of just how important competent government actually can be. That those shots in arms, the innovation that went into the vaccine, the ability to distribute and make vaccinations free and widely available, even as we work to get more people vaccinated, that process was government operating in partnership with the private sector to serve a basic goal to try to help keep people safe. And similarly, in terms of the economic strategy of providing people a little bit of breathing room, helping go through a crisis like this while avoiding significant increases in poverty. In fact, we're going to see child poverty cut by almost half this year as we come out of a crisis. Our ability to demonstrate in tangible ways that government can make an impact on people's lives. I think that that's the best shot that we have. But I will say, Melissa, and to all the leaders around the world, we in the United States face an inflection point. We need to demonstrate that our democracy can actually deliver for the people of this country, and that our democracy can actually deliver for the people of the world. And we understand that those are the stakes, and it is hard in an environment, a fractured media environment, an environment where people are divided. But certainly that is the sort of core of what President Biden is trying to accomplish both domestically and internationally, is that basic trust that government can be a positive force for good. I think we have a lot of opportunity coming out of this crisis, a lot of challenge as well, but it's what animates a lot of the work that we do on a daily basis.
Terrific. Well, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your continued public service.
Thank you, Melissa.